And in our very first pilots, they were about, how are cyclists going to feel about collecting data? Will they want to share data? How do we handle the anonymity? How do we make sure they feel comfortable? Really, then on a tech level, how do we handle this huge volume of data that's going to come to us? Even though the process has been a little slow in the early stages, what we're able to do is kind of co-create with the cities and learn from each other.
Irene, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast to chat with me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Emily. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
I was hoping you could do a little bit of a 30-second elevator pitch about yourself. So the usual stuff, your name, the organisation you work for, and also what you're passionate about.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Irene McAleese. I'm co-founder and chief strategy officer of See.Sense. See.Sense is a cycling technology and data company. A company is based in the UK, in Northern Ireland actually, but we've recently opened a sales office here in Australia. And what I'm passionate about really is, I'm the co-founder. I founded See.Sense with my husband, and we're really passionate about cycling safety in particular, and really about helping cities to transform for more cycling and other sustainable modes of transport, such as e-scooters, really to help make our cities better as places for people to move around. So that's what gets us out of bed every morning. And in fact, when we first started See.Sense, we gave up some, I suppose, successful corporate careers to start what at that point was a bike-like company using sensor technology, and people thought we were quite mad. So it's definitely been a journey to go from literally an idea to creating, an intelligent bike light, to sort of scaling that as a bike light, and then now to work with cities around the world, what has really been over the last 11 and a half years on that journey.
So you guys have done some really cool stuff. How does See.Sense use technology to try and enhance cycling safety, particularly in urban environments, which can be quite hectic and busy, particularly as a cyclist who's not maybe as protected as someone who's like in a car and all those kind of things?
Yeah. So we sort of look at it on two levels. So on the first is the sort of individual level. We use our intelligent and connected bike lights to monitor and react to the cyclist environment as they're riding along. So in riskier moments like roundabouts, road junctions, filtering in traffic, approaching car headlights, the light will detect those riskier moments and will actually flash brighter and faster, increasing the visibility of the cyclist to other modes. It also, because it's using its power intelligently, has a long run time, and that makes it very attractive to the cyclist to have what is really a daytime visible bike light with a very long run time. Because most collisions do actually happen during daylight hours, funnily enough. It's those peak commuter periods from 6 to 9 a.m. to 3 to 6 p.m. that you see up to 80% of collisions happening. So we think, if something as big as a car needs daytime visible running lights, as they've had in the EU since 2011, then we think bikes should have them as well. So that's what really set us out actually on the See.Sense journey was the intelligent bike lights for the individual cyclists. But really what we've found over time was that all of the data that we were using to really enable the light to flash in that fashion is actually incredibly granular, incredibly unique insight into the cyclist experience on the road. So what we wanted to do is then to start to aggregate that data up, taking it from lots of individual bikes, and then start to look at what is the pattern that's happening for all of those cyclists out on the network. Where are cyclists experiencing, more challenges? Where are those hotspot areas? What are the conditions of the roads even that the cyclists are traveling over? So you've got the swerving and braking patterns, you've got the road surface conditions. As you very well know, Emily, cities are increasingly using that data for cars, and we thought, well, there's a gap here that really there's, these kind of modes are not so well served. So that's really what See.Sense is doing. And I think one of our big differentiators as well is that when I say that the data is granular, it really is granular. So we're actually monitoring the environment of the cyclists up to 800 times a second. Yeah. So we're using edge processing and AI on the device to profile the individual rider as well. So that we get, if we know they're on an e-bike, we know what kind of bike they are, and we can filter a lot of that out. Yeah, very, very detailed, granular insights, and that's our big differentiator.
I'm so glad you mentioned data because it leads very nicely into my next question. And I just really like data, so it's a great conversation all around.
Yes.
Can you explain how See.Sense's data insights help with cities, towns, etc., improve cycling infrastructure? You kind of mentioned a little bit with the granularity, and you mentioned those like collision points. Did you want to expand on that a little bit more, and maybe other things that the data is used for?
Yeah, so we work with a number of cities now around the world. There's a number of use cases for the data. Some of it is very much around safety. So we have a big project, that we did working with Transport for London, for example, using our swerving and braking data to look at those more hazardous locations in London, which could be then prioritised for investment in infrastructure. And this is all very much linked to their Vision Zero agenda. Of course, it's very useful then to have data to baseline. If you do make an intervention, how has that changed over time? So yes, this is a dangerous, this area's been identified as a dangerous junction, but then you've got data to sort of show how the intervention changed without having to wait for a collision, right? So that's very useful. Around just general cycling infrastructure planning, there's lots of use cases as well. Where it's an interesting one is we're actually doing a project in Australia working with the Surf Coast Council in Victoria. The data that they have used there has helped to give deeper insights into how cyclists are using the network, but also some issues that they may have faced with particular junctions. They've actually fed that back. It's informed the actual design. It reshaped the tender and how they put that out. And then our data will then be used to monitor and evaluate the impact of that design as it goes in. So that's it's an interesting piece of work. Yes, and monitoring the impact of other infrastructure bike lanes that are going in. Really critical actually, because it's not increasingly. Cities are recognizing it's not just a count of data that's important. It really is important to understand the cyclist experience. What is the quality of the infrastructure that has gone in, and how is that making it more attractive then for a wider range of cyclists to use that infrastructure? So yeah, we have a project in Dunleary in Dublin, which is which has already started to look at how a piece of infrastructure that went in showed that yes, cyclists were attracted to use it, but what routes did they come from? How did it change their speed? In terms of, and also where are there potentially more things that need to be done on that network, on that piece of infrastructure, looking at where they're swerving and braking.
So you kind of do something similar to us, actually. There's a lot of collaboration with, say, local councils, research, and also other private businesses. How have you found the collaboration part between all those different stakeholders, particularly when trying to apply those actionable insights about cycling into kind of tangible change?
It's really been an exciting element of what we do. I personally find it very rewarding, because what we've done, I think, over the years, starting with our first data projects that we did back in 2017, I think it was, with Dublin and Manchester. The very first projects were pilot, proof of concept projects. And these were really critical because it gave us the opportunity to work with the city and understand what do they actually need. Because it's one thing to have data, but how do you get from, raw data to something that is actually usable for the city and is solving their needs? And in our very first pilots, they were about, how are cyclists going to feel about collecting data? Will they want to share data? How do we handle the anonymity? How do we make sure they feel comfortable? Really, then on a tech level, how do we handle this huge volume of data that's going to come to us? How do we build out the whole back end and make sure that it's really scalable and can handle large volumes of data? So we had those two issues. And I think on our very first project, we were very happy to sort of go, okay, we collected all this great data, we've managed to package it all up, and now we just hand it over the fence and give it to you. And you're going to magically go away and transform your city on the back of that. That was our first project, and it's been definitely a learning curve since then. You're laughing, you're nodding, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, what we found working with cities, has been there is a need for data, but also there may not always be the bandwidth to use the data. So, when they get it, there may not be the capability there to be able to use the data. There's still, connected data is still a new form, an innovative form of data. So maybe transport planners have been used to using count data or survey data in the past. And is it just, is a challenge to adopt to something new, in a new tool in your toolkit, as for when you're doing planning. So it's really working with people on that journey. Yeah, but I think it's actually been really useful for us because even though the process has been a little slow, in the early stages, what we're able to do is kind of co-create with the cities and learn from each other. We have some data dashboards now, which can help the cities utilize the data that we've created. And, we co-created those with the cities really based on understanding their needs. So we have a big project working with Essex County Council, for example. They are using See.Sense devices to track a bike fleet that they have in place. And one of the main things that they need to do is be able to report back data on bike usage, popular routes, and these kind of things to their funders. And we made it really easy for them to co-create that database and say, well, let's make it easy to download the reports in the format that you need to be able to present back to your funders. And that's taken a lot of administration off their hands, but also critically means that we get closer and closer to the data actually being used for decision making. It's really exciting that being able to evidence the impact of their scheme allowed them to go back and get more funding to expand the scheme, which is critical. So now they have more funding to put bikes out, which is gathering more data. And then they've been able to come to us as well and say, well, okay, there's, your dashboards may be answering, a large majority of what we want, but there's still bespoke reports and analysis that need to be done as well. And that's where we can help. Say, we did origin destination analysis and then looked at the dwell times of where all the bikes were stopped, and we're able to produce a report recommending that, these would be the top 10 locations based on those factors for parking. And, it's really satisfying to me, actually, that they went out and put a spade in the ground and actually built those cycle parking facilities based off the data. And, that's always really satisfying to see data to action. Yeah, so I think that is really crucial, actually. And we learn a lot from cities. We have a project in Australia as well, the Surf Coast one is sort of expanding. We're working with the city of Geelong now as well. And what we're doing there is developing these core insight reports, which are standardized reports, which will make it really easy for any local authority to draw down the data in a standardized way.
A lot of what you said has resonated very personally with our own experiences as
you see the grey hairs that we both have, Emily. So
yep.
I certainly have a testament to that. Yes,
I'm just hiding them a little better. It's fine. So slight change of track a little bit. You are also presenting at the upcoming ITS Australia Summit in Sydney, which is on the 13th till the 15th of August. I was hoping you might be able to give us a little sneak peek as to what attendees can expect in your sessions.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm very excited about this conference because I'm going to really take a bit more of a deep dive onto obviously the ITS applications for cycling data. And, as I mentioned earlier, there's been a bit of a gap really in connected or real-time cycling data, which can be gathered from bikes. And now we're really starting to see more and more cities having an appetite for that. Some of the use cases are around just understanding the flow and movement around of cyclists around the city. So where are they stopping? Where are the dwell times? What are the average speeds along segments? And, for some cities, this is a really, really important issue, especially where they have a lot of cyclists, understand and who are moving and who want to treat those cyclists in a way that affords them a recognition that cycling is, a valid means of transport across the city and should be prioritized as such. Traffic optimization, for example, traffic optimization, the timing of the traffic lights, traditionally has all been focused around the car, but actually there's space here now for, thinking about more equitable means of those prioritization. How do we make sure that cyclists also have a good experience? There's also demand for the sort of glosser, the green light optimization. So rather than basing it on the movement of cyclists, you can give feedback back to the cyclist as well. I want to also share some work that's happening in the EU in this space. See.Sense has been a participant in an EU-funded project called BITS, which is Bicycle ITS, and we were one of the projects that worked in the UK on that. It's now expanded into another project called Mega BITS, and there's a real a real movement towards getting more standardization of the data that's collected from all of these different floating bike modes. So data that's coming from the shared bikes, devices such as See.Sense, apps, etc. How do we standardize that data to make it more consumable for cities? And so there's some very interesting work happening around that. I'm going to touch on some of those things and share really, and I hope open up people's, I hope to illuminate some of the opportunities that are there for cycling that this real-time data and sensor data together can start to unlock.
Okay, so we've talked about heaps of different things, and I'm sure that people will want to probably follow up about any of these different things as well. So if they wanted to, how can people reach out to you or learn more about See.Sense?
So yes, firstly, love to come and meet me at the session at ITS Summit in Sydney. I'll be around in Sydney those few days. If you can't make that session, meet me for a coffee. Otherwise, visit our website or drop me an email at irene@seesense.cc.
Perfect. Well, Irene, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast to chat with me today, and we'll see you in Sydney in the summit.
Perfect. Thanks, Emily. Thank you so much.
To learn more about any of the guests that we have on the Bite Size podcast, you can check out our show notes at compassiot.substack.com. Alternatively, if you'd like to know more about the company that runs this podcast, Compass IoT, you can visit our website, which is compassiot.com.au. Until next time.